Hi everyone, my name is Angela and welcome to my YouTube channel. It is spring. At least according to the calendar, it is spring, and my garden, it is spring. There are spring flowers everywhere. In terms of my reading, I'm doing things a little differently this season where I'm going to choose a reading plan for the season. I've started to realize that there are some books that I'm just not getting to, some real heavy hitters that I really want to read, but I'm not getting to because they're hard for whatever reason it may be, that they're daunting, they're big, the subject matter is tricky, whatever the reason is, I'm not getting to them. And so I think I need to get to a point where I'm like, this is a list of books that I want to read this season. So it's a 3-month period. It's not like over a month. I think that would be just too hard to stick to. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And really my spring I guess it's a TBR. I mean, I have a long to be read list. I have a virtual one, a physical one. My spring reading plan is short and snazzy. It is not 30 books long. I feel like it is nice and concise, but while the quantity is light, the content really does pack a punch. I have some classics, I've got some contemporary fiction, some non-fiction, there are some really great books on here that I want to get to the end of this season, end of spring. I want to come into summer feeling like I feel like I accomplished something by having read these books. So I've chosen 7 key books that are on my I really want to read this TBR. There are then some additional books which are a bit like honourable mentions, spring-ish inspired, fun, light, maybe books that I mean, they're just like spring-ish inspired kind of books, but they're not the ones that are really those heavy hitters that are going to really help me hit some goals of those books that I want to check off like a bit of a list. So let's chat quickly about how I come up with this reading plan, because one of the struggles I had was when you're choosing a reading plan or a TBR, it's hard to put an end on it. It's hard to find that stopping point. So I wanted to share with you how I came up with my plan. And the fact is, I have some reading goals. There are some projects that I have underway, and there are some goals that I have, some life goals that have been going on for a while. There are some projects that have been going on for a while, and there are some new ones too. But the truth is that I have found that a lot of these books that are like almost bucket list kind of books, I'm buying them with the intention of reading, but I'm not reading them. And there's a number of reasons why I'm not reading them. It might be that I'm avoiding them because they are big books, you know, like above 500, 700, 1,000 pages. Or it could be that the writing style is complicated, or the subject matter is difficult. There's a variety of reasons why. Or it could be that they are just classics that as a bibliophile, I feel like I should read, but maybe they aren't something that I feel is of a real interest to me. Like the subject may not be of something that is what I would really want to pick up, but in my mind, I'm like, I'm a book lover and I feel like I should read this book. And I think there's probably a number of you out there that feel the same way, that if you love books, then there are some books that you have to have said that you have read. Tell me if I'm wrong down below. And ultimately, I just want to give them a go. I don't have to love them. I just want to read them and form my own opinion. I want to try them and make my own decision, because the fact is that I have read a lot of classics from the 17th to the 20th century, and I have liked a lot of them. So I want to try more of them. So when it comes to my reading plan, I wanted to come up with a handful of books that align with those goals that I have. I did start to blow this list out. You know, it started off as 5 books, then 10 books, then 15 books, and it became a bit crazy because I don't want to create a reading plan that does not fit into my normal cadence of reading. That would be stupid. I don't want to change that. So I definitely kept that in mind. I wanted to keep within my usual reading rate. And I also wanted to have room for me to be able to pick up a new release if I saw something or something else that just caught my eye. So this reading plan are not the only books that I want to read over spring. I want to be able to have the freedom to pick up other books as I find them. Which is why I think I chose 7 books as you must read these books, and then I've got more that are springish inspired. So I really only have 7 that I really want to read, and that is accomplishable, totally achievable for me. So at the moment, my reading goals that I do have are my children's book, my children's classics reading, which I have a few still to go. I also want to continue reading the classics from the 18th through to the 20th century. I have a number of them, not all of them, but a number of them. And I also want to try and squeeze in some Australian authors where I can. And a newer one over the last couple of months is some Australian history or Australian historical figures as well. So those are a couple. So there's about 4 kind of goals all over. That's kind of what I was wanting to align to. So like I said, I ended up with going with 7 books that fit into those 4-ish goals. So I've got a children's classic book, a big book, which is something over 500 pages in my mind. And it doesn't have to, I'm not reading a book because it's over 500 pages, but I am trying to read a book that I want to read and choosing it because, me trying to rephrase this. I'm trying to pick a book that I have been avoiding because it is a big book. That's why I'm choosing a book that's over 500 pages. Contemporary fiction, non-fiction, something Australian, something a little bit wacky. I do love to throw something like that in there, which is usually a quirky British novel, usually something, like in the interwar years or maybe something a little bit earlier. And if I finish these 7 books, I will most definitely feel a sense of accomplishment at the end of the season. So these books will take me through the next 3 months, through September, October, and to the end of November, which will then bring us into summer. And like I said, I could most definitely read these books at my current reading rate, which is between 4 to 6 books a month. I could just read these ones, I think, if I really wanted to be more diligent with my reading. I've been pretty slack lately. I've been watching a little more television, but that's an entirely other conversation. I could read a little bit more if I wanted to be a little more diligent and really hone into my reading life. So this is really achievable for me to do this. It's not a race, it's a good guide. So let's get into the 7 books first that I have chosen as my reading plan for spring. Okay, the first one I have is H for Hawk by Helen McDonald. This has been on my reading. I've wanted to read this for such a long time, and I don't know why I've hesitated. It is non-fiction, it is a memoir, and this is a little bit of a summary. As a child, Helen McDonald was determined to become a falconer, learning the arcane terminology and reading all the classic books. Years later, when her father died, she was struck deeply by grief. She became obsessed with the idea of training her own goshawk. She brought Mabel for £800 on a Scottish quayside and took her home to Cambridge, ready to embark on the long, strange business of trying to train this wildest of animals. H is for Hawk is an unflinchingly honest account of MacDonald's struggle with grief during the difficult process of the hawk's taming and her own untaming. This is a book about memory, nature, and nation, and how it might be possible to reconcile death with life and love. My understanding is there is a lot of beautiful nature writing, beautiful prose. It's very introspective. I'm really looking forward to reading this one. So H for Hawk is my non-fiction pick. My next pick is The Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard. And this is it's not my big book pick, this is my classic. So this was actually first published in 1990, and it's the first volume in I think 5 volumes called The Cazalet Chronicles, and it's about a family, the Cazalets, and I believe this first one is them going to their holiday home in Sussex, and it's, from what I can kind of gather, it sounds like a soap opera in a book. So this is a little bit of a summary of it. Every summer, the Cazalet brothers, Hugh, Edward and Rupert, return to the family home in the heart of Sussex countryside with their wives and children. There they are joined by their formidable parents and unmarried sister Rachel to enjoy 2 glorious months of picnics, games and sun-drenched excursions to the coast, but not even this idyllic setting can soothe the siblings' fears and heartache. Hugh is haunted by memories of the Great War, terrified at the looming prospect of a second. Edward, charming and handsome, is torn between his wife and his latest infidelity, and Rupert, a talented painter, is in turmoil over his inability to please his demanding new wife. Meanwhile, Rachel's unflinching loyalty to the family means risking her one chance at happiness with Sid, the woman she feels so passionately about. It's a family saga. It sounds like a lot of fun. I think I'm looking forward to being taken into a just like, you know, I love stories like the whole Downton Abbey, all those sort of things of these, the way that British families are written and the way that they are so close-knit and they all despise each other in their own unique way. I'm looking forward to reading this one. So this is my classic pick. My big book pick is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I don't think this needs much introduction. It was first published in 1952. It was not prescribed reading when I was at school. You know, we had other novels that we were to read, but I've seen a lot of traction with this particular book recently on YouTube. I think it's having a moment. And when I read the synopsis on it, I was like, yes, please. I have read Steinbeck. I don't recall his writing style or anything, but if you're not familiar with East of Eden, it is a bit of a Cain and Abel retelling, which I'm here for. So this is a little bit of the background. California's fertile Salinas Valley is home to two families whose destinies are fruitfully and fatally intertwined. Over the generations between the beginning of the 20th century and at the end of the First World War, the Trasks and the Hamiltons will helplessly replay the fall of Adam and Eve and the murderous rivalry of Cain and Abel. It may be the Trasks, I guess, if you're in America, but my mum's British, so the Trasks. So that is my big book pick. This particular edition is over 700 pages. I really like it. I'm a James Dean fan, and yes, I will be watching the movie afterwards. My contemporary fiction pick is Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I am ashamed to say I have never read an Ishiguro, and I'm ready to rectify that this year. This was originally published in 2021, and it sounds I think it's almost like a little science fiction-y, which is interesting. From her place in the store, Klara, an artificial friend with outstanding observational qualities, watches carefully the behaviour of those who come in to browse and of those who pass in the street outside. She remains hopeful a customer will soon choose her, but when the possibility emerges that her circumstances may change forever, Klara is warned not to invest too much in the promises of humans. In Klara and the Sun, Kazuo Ishiguro looks at our rapidly changing world through the eyes of an unforgettable narrator to explore a fundamental question. What does it mean to love? I'm really looking forward to reading my first Ishiguro, and I have quite a backlog, like a canon of books that I want to read. You know, Never Let Me Go and The Buried Giant, and there's all sorts. So this will be my first into the foray, and that'll be the one that I read this spring. My children's book selection is Heidi by Johanna Spyri, and I can't think of a better children's book for spring than Heidi. This was originally published in 1880, and it will be a reread for me because I most definitely read this as a child, although it may have been an abridged version. If you're not familiar with the story, it is about a young girl named Heidi who lives with her grandfather in the Swiss Alps. She ends up being a companion to a young girl who is ill, and she ends up leaving the Alps for a short time, and I'm looking forward to revisiting this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to get back into it, and I can't think of a better book for spring. Two more books on my prescribed, so these are the ones that I really want to read spring. This is my wackadoo book selection. It is Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. I've wanted to read this for a while. I've not been able to find a copy. I never thought I would find a copy in a bookstore, but lo and behold, I walk into Dimmicks and what is on the shelf? But this book. This was published in like 1889, and it has never been out of print since. It is about three friends and a dog that go up the Thames and have just this weird and wonderful comedy adventure. Martyrs to hypochondria and general seediness, Jay and his friends George and Harris decide that a jaunt up the Thames would suit them to a T. But when they set off, they can hardly predict the troubles that lie ahead with tow ropes, unreliable weather forecasts, and tins of pineapple chunks. Not to mention the devastation left in the wake of Jay's small fox terrier, Montmorency. Three Men in a Boat was an instant success when it appeared in 1889, and with its benign escapism, authorial excursions, and wonderful evocation of the late Victorian clerking classes, it hilariously captured the spirit of its age. I think it's going to be a bit of fun. It's a little bit wacky, a little bit funny. That is my wackadoo book. I am dead keen to read more Australian anything, non-fiction, fiction. I really am trying to have more ownership over this space. And I read a lot of British literature because I have such a connection to England. My mum is from England. My dad was born in England but grew up in New Zealand. I have such a connection there, and I remember going to England so many times. And anyway, I have a connection there. I live in Australia, but there is so much of England in Australia. Anyway, I'm trying to read more Australian stuff. Fiction, non-fiction, you name it, I'm going to try and read it now. So this is a novel that was written by Peter Carey in 2001, and it won the Booker Prize. And it is The True History of the Kelly Gang. And I was floored when I was watching Kelly Swearington. I apologise if I mixed up the name. This week, and she read it. I couldn't believe it. What are the odds that a book that is over 20 years old would be read? Anyway, I've wanted to read it for a while. I thought it would be a really great spring read, summer read. And I just need to give a little bit of history around this book though, because even though it says The True History of the Kelly Gang, Peter Carey is a little bit of a liar because it's not quite. First of all, despite the title, this is not non-fiction. This is fiction. It is loosely based on the life of Ned Kelly. Ned Kelly was a real life person. He was a bushranger. He was an outlaw. A bushranger is kind of like a cowboy, I guess, you know, like a Jesse James, Billy the Kid kind of guy. He was a convicted police murderer. He was a gang leader. He was a real life person who was around in the late 1800s. He was and still is quite an infamous character in Australia, in Australian history. So much so that if someone is a rebel against authority today, they will most definitely cite Ned Kelly as one of their heroes. He is most definitely still someone that people will look up to today as a rebel against authority. So he has quite a history, even all these, like, centuries later. And Ned Kelly was born around the 1850s, when Australia was about 70 years out from being a convict colony. So at the time he was born, transported convicts were coming out of their servitude. They were they were free. They were finding new work. They were trying to make a life in Australia. And Kelly's father was one of those people. It was a rough and raw existence for a lot of people. And it's a time that I want to understand more about from these people who were trying to make a life in Australia. Kelly himself was born in Australia, even though his father was a transported convict. But anyway, I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself here. He was a real person. But this book is loosely based on his life. My understanding is that it is written it's written in the form of, like, he is writing to his daughter, his fictitious daughter, while he is on the run from the law. And it kind of just goes through his upbringing, his, all that sort of stuff. And he only lived 25 years. He did not live a very long time, but he saw a lot. He did a lot. And so I'm looking forward to reading this one. I think in terms of the writing, it's going to be a challenge because I think the technique, I don't think there's a comma in this book, so it's going to be interesting. I'm not a fan of those books that don't use punctuation. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And I did try and watch the movie adaptation, which was much too raw. I did not get into it. I just could not do it. So hopefully the book is a little bit different for me. But this is a little bit of a summary. In True History of the Kelly Gang, the legendary Ned Kelly speaks for himself, scribbling his narrative on errant scraps of paper, in semi-literate but magically descriptive prose as he flees from the police. To his pursuers, Kelly is nothing but a monstrous criminal, a thief and a murderer. To his own people, the lowly class of ordinary Australians, the bushranger is a hero, defying the authority of the English to direct their lives. Indentured by his bootlegger mother to a famous horse thief, Ned Kelly saw his first prison cell at 15 and by the age of 26 had become the most wanted man in the wild colony of Victoria, taking over whole towns and defying the law until finally he was captured and hanged. So like I said, it was won the Booker Prize in 2001. It is, there's definitely some bones are in the truth of Ned Kelly, but I think it's going to be a bit of a wild ride, and I'm looking forward to reading this one. So this is my Australian pick. So now let's get into some of the honourable mentions. These are books that are not like, these are the ones that I want to read. This is not overwhelming, right? This is something that is completely achievable. So the rest of them are the ones that are like, these are, if I want to pick up a book over spring, I should probably reach for these ones first. These were already on my bookshelf, so I want to get to these first. First of all, I need to mention this doorstop of a book that I mentioned to you a few videos back. This is Praiseworthy by Alexis Wright. I promised you guys that I would read this book, and I have started reading this book. According to Storygraph, I am 3% of the way into this book, and visually that is this much, which that looks more than 3% of the way through. I don't know about you. But anyway, I'm reading it. There are moments where I want to put it down. There are moments when I want to keep reading. It's very conflicting. I have a lot of thoughts as I read this book. I am still doing it. I am also picking up the audiobook here and there, which is very helpful. Thank you to everyone who commented saying, pick up the audiobook to help get into the prose and the dialogue and the way that it really has helped. So thank you so much for everyone that commented to suggest that. That has helped. But I'm into it, started it. I will see where it goes. I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of conflict. I want to keep going. There are times when I want to stop. We'll see. The Hazelbourne Ladies Motorcycle and Flying Club. This one is just going to be a fun spring afternoon, I'm sure. This is by Helen Simonson, and I've seen this out for a while. It's just set in the interwar years in between the Great War and World War II. But it just says, in the summer of 1919, and Constance Haverhill is without prospects. Now that all the men have returned from the front, she has been asked to give up her cottage and her job at the estate she helped to run during the war. Instead, she's sent as a lady's companion to an old family friend who is convalescing at a seaside hotel, where she is swept up in the social world of Hazelbourne-on-Sea and its colourful inhabitants, most notably Poppy Werrell. And then it goes on to say that I think Poppy operates a taxi and delivery service and runs a motorcycle club, which she's also going to add flying lessons to. It's a comedy, it's got a bit of humour, very heartwarming. So I think this is going to be a lovely way to welcome spring. I'm looking forward to sitting outside finally on a warm spring day when it's not raining. This one is the antithesis of this book that I just shared. This is A Very British Murder from Lucy Worsley. I shared recently that I read my first Lucy Worsley book, which was a Agatha Christie biography. This one I came across, I don't know how, but Lucy Worsley, her writing was really great. And this one is the curious story of how crime was turned into an art. And I thought that sounds like a really interesting premise. This is the story of a national obsession. Ever since the Ratcliffe Highway murders caused a nationwide panic in Regency England, the British have taken an almost ghoulish pleasure in a good murder. This fascination helped create a whole new world of entertainment, inspiring novels, plays and films, puppet shows, paintings and true crime journalism, as well as an army of fictional detectives who still enthrall us today. I think it's going to take us through what the actual crime and then maybe how that sort of thing was translated into literature, perhaps, or film, maybe. Like I think there's something in there about Charles Dickens, and anyway. That was something else that I'm excited to add to my reading plan. I also have Raynor Winn, The Salt Path. My husband is going to be doing a fair bit of hiking this spring through Portugal, and so I'm going to be joining him virtually by reading a couple of books about this sort of stuff. And this one I have really wanted to read for a while. I think it's going to be really lovely to read. There is some heavy content, but nonetheless. Just days after Raynor Winn learned that Moth, her husband of 32 years, was terminally ill, they lost their home and livelihood. With nothing left and little time, they impulsively decided to walk the 630-mile south coast path from Somerset to Dorset via Devon and Cornwall. Living wild and free at the mercy of sea and sky, they discovered a new liberating existence, but what would they find at journey's end? So it's something that I've wanted to read for a while, and it just happened to be front and center at a bookstore recently, so I'm that's something else that I think will be great for spring. And continuing the warm, fuzzy British vibes, The Wonderful World of James Herriott, which is a charming collection of classic stories. I haven't read any James Herriott. I definitely remember watching the original All Creatures Great and Small series growing up, but I have not watched the new series. But this is something I think will be a lot of fun. A small selection of stories. There are 12 stories. And I thought it would be really good maybe to have it on the bedside. There's an introduction by his 2 children in here as well. But that'd be a really lovely one for spring. I mean, if that's not a spring cover, I don't know what is. Another Australian book that I would love to read sooner rather than later, which makes me feel like it is a spring read because I'm heavy in the British right now. A Fortunate Life by A.B. Facey. So there are a number of books when I think of Australian literature that are like at the top of the, there was that top 100 books of the 21st century. If you were to ask Australians what are the top books of, Australian literature, A.B. Facey's A Fortunate Life would be, if not in the top 2, the top one. And this was an autobiography that was published, 1980, I think. 1981 it was published, and it was an autobiography of Albert Facey. Oh my gosh, I don't know anything about this. Albert Facey. I do know stuff about this. It's an autobiography about Albert Facey, who was born in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. Kalgoorlie is east of where I am. It is a gold mining town. And he was born there in 1894. And this is his autobiography of him growing up in Western Australia and doing some tough yards. And it is probably one of the most endearing and beloved pieces of literature to come out of Australia. It's an autobiography. This is a little bit of what it's about. Albert Facey was born in 1894 and first sent to work at the age of 8. He lived the rough frontier of a labourer and farmer, gained a hard-won literacy, had his life saved by Indigenous trackers, survived Gallipoli, raised a family through the Depression, lost a son in the Second World War, and spent 60 years with his beloved wife Evelyn. Despite enduring unimaginable hardships, Facey always saw his life as a fortunate one. A classic story, Facey simply penned autobiography is a unique window into the history of Australian life through the greater parts of the 20th century, the extraordinary journey of an ordinary man. So I've always wanted to read it, and I came across this beautiful edition from Fremantle Press. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. This one is Benjamin Myers' Cuddy. This was released in, I want to say it was last year, 2022 maybe, 2023. I love Benjamin Myers' writing. I love it. This one, however, I think is going to be a challenge because there is poetry, there is, look at this. What is this? Look at the font, how the font goes from big down to small. But then there's it's, I don't know if it's experimental or what, but look at this formatting. I think it's going to be quite interesting to read. It's described as lyrical, poetic. Benjamin Myers' writing is incredible. Cuddy is, I think, the name of Saint Cuthbert, who is a monk at Lindisfarne. So this is a long time ago this is set. It all begins and ends with a vision, a cathedral on a hill. From the first Viking invaders to a contemporary England defined by austerity, Cuddy spins an unforgettable legend of Northern England's past and present from the seeds of historical truth and strange mythology. A novel like no other, incorporating poetry, prose, play, diary, and real historical accounts. It whirls through time, illuminating the dreams, desires, connections, and communities of working people across centuries. It's going to be quite, I think it's going to be quite a challenge to read, and I just don't know. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. All the other work I've read of his have been novels. They've just been straight plain novels, and they're beautiful. So this is going to be quite different, but Cuddy is up there. I've only got a couple more to go. Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. In the spring of 1666, a bolt of infected cloth carries the plague from London to the quiet village of I am. The villagers elect to isolate themselves in a fateful quarantine seen through the eyes of 18-year-old Anna Frith. As death and superstition creep from household to household, she must confront loss and the lure of illicit love in an extraordinary year of wonders. I really do enjoy Geraldine Brooks. The only book I read of hers was, I think it was The People of the Book. I did try and read another book of hers, which I could not get into. But I do have others that I want to read of her. I really want to read March, which is a retelling of the father's perspective from Little Women, so Mr. March. I do want to read that. There's a number of books of hers that I want to read. And is she Australian? Year of Wonders. I'm looking forward to reading that one. Look at my shelf filling up. Oh, I lie. I've got 2 more to go. Nancy Mitford's The Pursuit of Love. I really want to read this one. It's such a teeny tiny one. I think this would be perfect to read on the train to work. I really like, some of these are a little bit bigger. I really don't like taking these sort of size ones on the train with me because they're just too big. But these smaller ones are ideal, and this is a good one. So The Pursuit of Love was published a long time ago, I think in the 40s, 1945. Longing for love, obsessed with weddings and sex, Linda and her sisters and cousin Fanny are on the lookout for the perfect lover. But finding Mr. Wright is much harder than any of the sisters had thought. Linda must suffer marriage first to stuffy Tory MP and then to handsome and humourless communist, before finding real love in war-torn Paris. The Pursuit of Love is one of the funniest and sharpest novels about love and growing up ever written. I've wanted to read it for a while. I think I started it. I'm sure I started it and then I just stopped. So that's something I would love to read this spring. And then my last one, which is not a wacky British one, but something I would love to finish anyway. Ex Libras by Anne Fadiman, Confessions of a Common Reader. And this is essays, I suppose, but it's about reading. It's just these little essays about reading and books. And this was published in 1998. I'm not sure where I picked this up. Maybe it was referenced in a Slightly Foxed episode. It sounds like something that they would have mentioned in their podcast. A terrifically entertaining collection of personal essays about books, heartening, tender, wise, and hilarious. So I think that'd be a lovely little book, a little palate cleanser maybe in between some of these heavier books. But this is my spring reading plan. What do you think? I do love being able to put them all on one shelf, so I don't have any excuse in not knowing where the books are or which books I have put on my spring plan. I'm really looking forward to finishing these. And the idea is that I hope my plan is that after I've read one of these 7 books, I'll pick up another one of these 7 books and then I can just continue on with these as they go. But thank you so much for joining me. I know that a number of you are coming into autumn in the Northern Hemisphere. Autumn is hands down my favourite season, but I am looking forward to spring. I am looking forward to getting outside and enjoying some warm weather, some sunshine, being able to sit outside and read. So please, do enjoy the season you are in. I would love to hear, maybe if you have any books that are coming up on your... Do you have something that you want to get done this season? What is it that you really want to read this season? Whether it's season inspired or just month inspired, maybe it's Frankenstein for Halloween or something. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead and I will see you soon. Bye.